Back in February, Nintendo officially announced that they would be shutting down support for the 3DS and Wii U eShop, and on March 27th, 2023, you will no longer be able to make purchases on those devices. While closure is still months away, as of May 23rd, you're no longer able to use a credit card or debit card to add funds to your account. And on August 29th, you will no longer be able to use a Nintendo eShop card to add funds either. Although I believe you can use a credit card to make purchases if you buy the software through Nintendo's website. And if your 3DS and Wii U accounts are linked with your Nintendo Switch account, you could just add funds via Nintendo Switch. But either way, I wanted to make a short list of 3DS games to check out before the store officially closes. Specifically, I wanted to talk about 3DS games that are either digital only or have extremely expensive physical cartridges. Also, keep in mind this list only includes games that I've actually beaten. So let's just jump right into it. First on my list is Inazuma 11. Inazuma 11 stars a boy named Mark Evans, who is the captain of his junior high soccer team. One day, the top striker of another soccer team, Axel Blaze, transfers to his school. Soon after, they are challenged by the top school in their area, Royal Academy. Winning means they can continue as a soccer club, but if they lose, they're forced to disband. So Inazuma 11 is a soccer RPG, and the main aspect of the game is soccer. You control your players using your stylus, you can have them pass the ball to each other, steal the ball from your opponents, or kick the ball into your opponent's goal. One thing this game has that actually really reminds me a lot of Mario Tennis Power Tour on the Game Boy Advance is that this game has special moves. So during soccer matches, whenever your players are attempting to do something like steal the ball from the opponents or kick the ball into the opponent's goal, there's a chance they'll fail. And special moves basically just increase the chances of them succeeding. They can have pretty cool animations, plus they make the game a lot easier. Well, that is until your opponents start to spam them, preventing you from ever getting to their goal, let alone actually scoring. But yeah, most of the time special moves are completely awesome. Another thing I find interesting in this game is that it has random encounters. But whenever you walk outside of a building, there's a chance that you're going to face off against some random students from various clubs in a soccer skirmish. These can be kind of nice though, as they allow you to level up your characters, which will increase their stats. Plus, you get friendship points, which is the main currency in this game, which you can use to buy items or scout players. When it comes to scouting players, you're able to scout random students from different clubs or students that aren't from any clubs. But on top of that, you're also able to scout opponents that you face in the main story. Another aspect of this game that I liked is that you're able to train specific stats for each of your players. So if you want to increase a certain stat, like let's say you want someone to be really good at kicking, you can increase their kick stat. By default, Mark Evans is your goalie. If you want to make him like a really good goalie, you can increase his guard stat, and etc. And at a certain point in the game, you're even able to upgrade all of your team at once, which is really handy. It can be a bit of a grind, but it's technically optional, so if that's your thing, I feel like you'd really enjoy that aspect of this game. Plot-wise, this game is actually pretty entertaining in my opinion. I didn't have any expectations for the plot of this game, but it ended up being more dramatic than I was expecting. Without spoiling too much of this game, there is at least one assassination attempt, which I feel like just one assassination attempt is already insane. There are mysterious pasts and tragic backstories, plus some romance, well, like a shonen romance where it's completely one-sided. This game just has it all. Plus, the game itself was actually pretty short. I believe I finished it under 30 hours, I want to say, and that included some grinding. The 3DS version of Inazuma 11 is actually a port of the original DS game, so if you live in North America, technically this is the only way to play it, unless you import the game, of course. This game also has a whole franchise to it. There's an anime, there's multiple sequels, there's a trading card game. There's a whole lot going on with this game, and I don't really want to get into all of it just because I don't want this whole video to be about this game. But if you're curious, I definitely recommend you look it up. Next up is probably the most niche title on my list and possibly in my collection of games. It is Concept Revolt. So, in Concept Revolt, you play as Alan, an amnesiac who wakes up in the city of Selphis and meets a woman named Alicia, who turns out to be the leader of the Free Bats, which is a rebel group fighting against Count Kranis. Count Kranis, the ruler of the city of Selphis, is trying to wipe out all of the scepters in the city. Scepters being people that are able to use the power of magical cards, aka every single character in this game. But yeah, Cults of Revolt is basically a board game slash deck building game. Think Monopoly meets Magic the Gathering. So, like in Monopoly, you are attempting to collect money from other players, except instead of buying property, you summon monsters onto different spaces on a board. So I guess let me just give you an example of a turn. Okay, so when it's your turn to go, basically you roll 2 dice, and whatever number you get, you move that number of spaces, and if you land on an empty space, you can summon a creature. Some creatures require different conditions to be fulfilled before you can actually summon them, but anyways, if you do summon a creature and it's your opponent's turn, if they actually land on that creature, they either pay a toll or they can choose to fight. So if they choose to fight, they use a creature from their hand to fight the creature that is on that space. And if they're able to defeat your creature, then their creature that they used to beat yours replaces it on the board. If they aren't able to defeat your creature, then they have to pay the toll. And if their creature actually dies, then they just lose that card altogether. So basically the goal of this game is to get a certain amount of money and make it to a checkpoint in order to win. In that respect, it actually reminds me a lot of Fortune Street, as in that game, basically you're supposed to reach a certain amount of money and make it to the bank to win. It's like that in this game. There are 4 different elements in this game, that being water, forest or grass, fire, and air, but there's also a 5th neutral element for the creatures. Likewise on the boards, there are 4 different types of land, again being water, grass or forest, air, and fire. Summoning the same element of a creature as the land, so for example, summoning a water creature on water, will actually give them a boost of health in battle. You're also able to invest in land, which increases the toll that your opponents have to pay if they land on it, plus it increases the health bonus your creatures receive. On top of that, you're also able to move creatures onto other adjacent lands. So if you had a water creature on a fire land, but next to it was a water one, you could move it to the water one on one of your turns. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about the mechanics in this game, as there are kind of a lot of them, but other cards you can use are spell cards and item cards. Spell cards having all sorts of different effects that can hurt your opponent and help you, help your opponent and hurt you, or vice versa. But items actually take place in battle, and they can either help your creature win a fight or help them survive. This game has a pretty big single-player campaign. On top of just the main story, there's also different challenges that you can do, plus this game has some DLC if you want to get those missions. This game also has multiplayer, but seeing as how the 3DS and Wii U eShop are shutting down, I'm not sure how long the 3DS servers are going to stay up. But personally, I feel like board game type games are the easiest to just play around and have some fun with that, so I feel like even after you finish the main story, you can still have fun just playing the game. And speaking of the main story, I'd be lying if I said I remembered a great deal of it, but from what I do remember, it was entertaining. I feel like it was actually pretty goofy despite its kind of dark setting. And after the fight with Count Kranis, the plot honestly kind of gets weirder as it goes on. But this game was a lot of fun. I put a ton of hours into it. Also, I forgot to mention it, and it might sound kind of obvious, but in this game you do collect points, which you can use to buy different card packs that you unlock as you continue the main story. Also, at a certain point, you do get a customizable card, which you can add to your deck, and you can kind of change the stats of that card, plus you can actually give it whatever ability you want to give it. Though, you do have to purchase a separate parts pack in order to actually get parts to customize this card with. If you think this is your type of thing, then definitely check it out. And if you want to buy a physical copy of this game, good luck, because it's really expensive. So the next game on my list, or should I say games, is the Etrian Odyssey series. So Etrian Odyssey is a series of JRPGs with 5 main games on the 3DS and 2 spin-off titles, made in the style of the Mystery Dungeon games, though the second game was never actually localized in North America. Anyways, I'm including all of the Etrian Odyssey games on this list because they pretty much are all identical gameplay-wise. Start off each game by creating a party of 5 characters. You pick a class for each character, and you decide what they look like based on some pre-made artwork created for that class. And finally, you give them a name. Etrian Odyssey 5 and Nexus actually expanded on the customizable options that they give you. Now you're able to change the color of their hair, their eyes, their skin, as well as give them a voice. After you finish creating your characters, you're then given a mission to go out and explore the first dungeon and draw a map of the first floor, or at least however much of it they ask you to draw. As you explore, you'll notice on the top screen, on the bottom right-hand corner, there's an indicator that starts to change color for each step you take. Once it reaches red, that means you're about to fight a monster. So, combat in this game is turn-based. You can either attack, defend, use an item, use a skill, switch rows, or run away. Each Etrian Odyssey game also has some kind of super skill or limit break type thing that can kind of change the tide of battle, but it varies from game to game. So Etrian Odyssey battles are the type of battles where you select all of your character's commands and then the battle plays out. And once every character and enemy is acted, then you kind of rinse and repeat. Defeating enemies actually gives you materials that you can sell at the item shop in order to unlock better equipment. So outside of battles is the exploring part of the game. So for each floor of each dungeon, you're expected to draw a map of each area, and you're given different icons that you can use to mark points of interest such as healing points, maybe points that seem like they could be important for some kind of quest, mining and gathering and fishing points, and shortcuts you can use to get through the dungeon a little faster. While exploring dungeons, you'll run into certain types of enemies that are actually on the overworld that you can actually see and encounter. These enemies are known as FOEs, and they're kind of like mini bosses, sort of, except they're extremely powerful. Each FOE has a different type of movement pattern that once you figure it out, you can actually avoid them. And fighting them when you're not strong enough is basically a death sentence, though it is very satisfying once you're actually strong enough to beat them. Outside of fighting monsters and exploring dungeons, there's the town, or city, or whatever it is in whatever game you're playing. In the town, you can buy and sell items at the item shop, rest at the inn, and store different items that maybe you don't have room in your bag for, accept different requests at the bar, as well as talk to different people, change your party members, and create new party members if you want to try out different classes. And there's also accepting missions that actually progress the plot of the game. Also, wow, I almost completely forgot to mention this aspect of the game, but each class of this game has a skill tree. And whenever your characters level up, they gain points that you can allocate to this skill tree. And you can either increase skills that you personally use all the time to make them more powerful, or you can unlock new skills. Generally, I'd say that each class has maybe 2 different paths to take, where their skills sort of geared towards a certain style of play. But each class also features skills that work outside of battle. Like, for example, every class has some kind of exploring skill, basically, where you can gather more materials from gathering spots within dungeons. But yeah, those are pretty much the basics of Etrian Odyssey. However, there's one huge difference between the Etrian Odyssey Untold games and just the regular Etrian Odyssey games. And that kind of brings me into the plot of each game, since I haven't really talked about that at all. So, Etrian Odyssey Untold 1 and 2 are remakes of the first Etrian Odyssey games. And one thing they do is they allow you to choose between 2 different modes. There's classic mode where you create your characters and do everything that I just said, but there's also a story mode where you actually play as pre-created characters. These characters already have their classes determined, their appearances determined, their names determined. They're basically just like regular RPG characters. But yeah, story mode is actually a lot of fun since these characters are actual characters and not just silent protagonists that you created. And I believe there's actually more dialogue in the Untold games story mode just because the characters actually speak and have conversations with each other as well as other characters. I've never actually played the classic mode on the Untold games, so I don't know how the story mode differs from the classic mode, but I did enjoy the story of the first Untold game. And to be honest, it's been a long time since I've played an Etrian Odyssey game, so I don't really remember the plots of any of them, and I haven't actually finished Untold 2. But I do highly recommend these games because they're a ton of fun. But again, they're on this list because either buy them digitally for a decent price. I think Untold 1 is actually $20, and maybe Etrian Odyssey 4 is as well. But if you try to buy them physically, they're extremely expensive. If you're looking for a good starting place for Etrian Odyssey, I would recommend 4. That's kind of where I started, and I had a lot of fun with that game. Although, I think the only Etrian Odyssey game that would be a bad place to start is Etrian Odyssey Nexus, because in that game, well, that game is a lot longer than a regular Etrian Odyssey game. There's way more dungeons to explore, and they also give you a lot more classes to pick from. And I feel like that can be a little overwhelming if you've never played an Etrian Odyssey game, because you might not know what to expect. And Etrian Odyssey is hard. Like, it's not an easy game. It's a type of game where, in your first dungeon, expect your characters to die, because enemies hit like trucks pretty much throughout the entire game, unless you're extremely over-leveled. But again, I don't want this whole video to be about one game series, so I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty differences between each game, but there are a few. I guess special shout out to Persona Q, since that's also an Etrian Odyssey game kinda, except with Persona characters and like Persona Shin Megami Tensei mechanics. But I believe the physical version of that game is actually not that expensive, so yeah, if you want to get a physical, I guess you can. But yeah, I love Etrian Odyssey so much, I hope it comes to the Switch.